We are glad to see you again on our channel. And today we have a review of a film in which a horrible murder of a girl happens in a small town. John Marshall takes the case, but he does not believe that there is a werewolf involved, although all points to this. The first crime is followed by more and more. Will John be able to focus on work and find the perpetrator? The young couple Brianne Paulson and PJ Palfrey arrive at the cottage they rented for a couple of days in a small town. Lovers immediately go to a bar and talk there about that they left their dog for 2 days. The girl worries, but the guy calms her down and says that during 2 days, nothing will happen with a Yorkshire Terrier. Locals enter the bar, talking loudly, and PJ starts arguing with them, making them note to behave quietly. One of the locals looks at the guy angrily, but the other restrains him, apologizes to the couple, and they leave. In the evening, the couple spend time in the house. PJ opens the wine and looks at the ring. He is going to make a proposal to the girl. PJ and Brianne bathe in a jacuzzi outside. Then the guy goes to the shower and the girl waits for him. PJ comes out of the shower and hears the dogs barking. He goes out on the porch and sees Brianne's body torn to pieces. Blood is everywhere. PJ calls the rescue service. There are footprints of an animal on the snow. PJ Palfrey. John Marshall, an officer, is at a meeting of alcoholics. He says he's been in the program for 6 years, not drinking for 3 years. He also says he's infuriated by his ex-wife, and that he wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the program. John Marshall. Sheriff Hadley is at the crime scene. Detective Julia Robson is here too. John Marshall arrives. Officers are blocking the road. Sheriff is trying to find out the details of the crime, although it is time for him to retire, not to work. He wondered whether the victim had been raped and was told that her female organs had been removed. Sheriff Hadley says for an article in the newspaper that the murder here happens every 2 years, and this is a unique case. He promises that the staff will find the suspects, and therefore the residents of Snow Hollow can sleep peacefully. The journalist is snide. Sheriff Hadley. In the office at the station, Sheriff is worried that he said something wrong to the journalist, but John Marshall calms him down. John Marshall is the son of Sheriff Hadley. Sheriff says that he has never seen such a murder, and this is scary. The man remembers how his team worked 20 years ago. He tells his son to assemble and direct his team of officers, and he takes care of the rest. Julia Robson is interviewing locals who had a conflict with a couple at a bar. Locals say they had an argument, but they didn't touch him or the girl. Julia Robson. The officers try to reconstruct the chronology of events, saying that those who deprived the girl of life came out of the forest, grabbed the girl near the hot tub, dragged her into the yard, and she did not shout at all. The girl had a female organ removed. On the ground there are only dogs' tracks. One of the officers suspects the girl's boyfriend. The other one says there was a full moon yesterday and today. The girl is from here, and the officers will be talking to the director, as well as interviewing neighbors and residents. John believes that the killer is a hunter with experience in carcass cutting, and therefore they need to look for a similar. He tells to report him back, and he will talk to Sheriff. Officer Paul Carnery says it's the Fed's job, not theirs, and he is sure that it was an animal. John says that now everyone is discussing only this crime, but Paul stands his ground, confident that it is not necessary to meddle in the investigation. He is angry because they have enough work to do. The girl, a snowboarding instructor, goes home after her shift. Near the car in the dark, she sees an animal approaching her, who attacks the girl and takes her life. John's ex-wife, Brittany Marshall, and their daughter, Jenna Marshall, are sitting in a cafe. Brittany says that her daughter goes to college with a gymnastics scholarship and is angered that John will not be able to attend her. John becomes angry and says that he will come, just to make the ex stops talking. Jenna Marshall. John is reported about a new victim. He commands the city to be closed down. Fellow officers tell John that it is an animal, but he stubbornly does not believe. He calls Officer Bow to him, and there is a fight between them. At the crime scene, everyone wants something from John. Signature, fingerprints, press drive up. His head is spinning. He tells Detective Julia Robson to deal with the crime scene, and he will deal with the rest. At the funeral of one of the injured girls, her father lashes out at John, asking why the culprit hasn't been found yet, he swears. At home, John takes out his stash of alcohol and starts drinking. Near the store, Detective Julia sees the inscription, "Stop the werewolf," and asks to remove it, so there is no unnecessary discussion. The employee says he just hung up, but he doesn't decide what to write. Detective Julia hints that his license plates are expired, and the employee agrees to remove the inscription. At the station, John sees a gift from Officer Bowe. He says that everything is, of course, touching, but he has already processed the dismissal of the officer. Sheriff thinks they need an expert on exotic animals. Officer Chavez assumes that the criminal is either a wolf or a werewolf. Detective Julia reads the results of the forensic report. It says that the girl's clothes have the hair of her dog, but also wolf hair. Detective Julia shows pictures of the victim and says that she was deprived of her head. And on the entire body, there are bites. Experts say that the bites are like the animal was the size of a bear, with a huge jaw, but no saliva and no DNA. John enters his daughter's room and asks her to carry a pepper spray that he once gave her. The girl does not understand why. She begins to analyze her father's behavior psychologically, and John becomes angry. The girl says her mother abandoned John, and so he tries to earn her respect even now. John tells Detective Julia that the FBI has a lot of tasks to do, so they have to manage on their own. John asks the girl if she agrees that the perpetrator is human and receives a positive answer. John says they can lie in wait in case the unsub comes back to the scene. At this point, a beer bottle from the woods smashes in their car. John and Detective Julia arrive to PJ. They wonder if the guy remembers anything that might help the case, but PJ gets angry and says he's said 100 times that he hasn't seen anything. Officers give the girl's belongings to PJ, he cries. Officers leave. At the door, PJ stops John and tells him that if they find the criminal, they should kill him by shooting him in the head. Liz Fairchild and her little daughter are sitting in a cafe. A man comes up to them and starts talking to them, asking the girl where they live, what school the baby goes to, and about the car. The girl notices something wrong and calls the police. In the precinct, she says that the man has a local dialect, is very tall, and smells like a dark room where film is developed. She thinks he's the killer. Officers interview a lot of people, residents, and all the testimony is recorded. The doctor examines Sheriff, and John learns that his father has a heart murmur and would go to the clinic. John is angry and yells at his father that he should focus on health rather than work. His dad says he knows his body and he's not going anywhere with all this going on in town. Liz Fairchild and her daughter drive home, and in the middle of the road, the girl sees a werewolf. The beast attacks the girl and takes her life. She's trying to fight back, but she can't. John begins reading books and learning more about werewolves. He also calls the school to get a list of employees. John thinks why victims are only women. John gets a call record from some Liz man. He's sending an expert to look for prints on the phone. The officers are arming themselves. Sheriff says that today this monster will reappear as it's a full moon. He says to keep radio silence until they know it. All patrols stand by. When it comes to the call, the officers should clearly state the address for reinforcements. After giving everyone the commands, Sheriff crushes his heart and John tells him to retire. He also asks a female colleague to call an ambulance for his father. Jenna Marshall is on the phone with a guy and arranges a meeting today. The couple meet in the car. Jenna is sitting on the guy on the front seat. They kiss. The werewolf crashes into the car. John hears the address on the radio and immediately leaves. He shoots a werewolf several times, but he manages to leave. John sees Jenna near the car and is angry at her daughter, says that she should not have been here because at work, he cannot yet worry about her. He yells at his daughter, and Jenna tells her father that during 17 years, she has barely seen him, and he has never praised her. The girl says that she will go to college and gladly leave John. She also says that it is better to live with strangers than with her father. Then she says she's bleeding from her head and needs to go to the hospital. Employees find the body of Officer Chavez, deprived of life. John is not allowed into the group on alcoholism, which he attended. The man again drinks and smokes. John crashes the car after driving into a pole. Jenna drags him to bed. John says he promised his daughter to catch the criminal, but did not catch him. He cries and says he's a big loser. Jenna asks him to go to bed because he scares her. Detective Julia asks John if he is normal and then says that the criminal has been found. She shows him his body. The killer is a pharmacist, local. He has a wolf tattoo and a collection of knives. His costume has not yet been found, but syringes were found near the crime scenes. Detective Julia and John drive in the car. The girl tells John to rest and focus on the important, and if he wants to be sheriff, then he should behave as sheriff. John delivers all belongings of the victims to their relatives. John again comes to the group of alcoholics and says that due to stress he is drunk again. He says that he is disgusting. Lied to his father at the last meeting. He says the only time he realizes what's going on in his life is when people are asking if he's okay. Detective Julia notices threads in the evidence box. Then the girl receives a call from PJ, who says that he and the officer had forgotten something for sewing, a large needle. She's in an office car going somewhere fast. John arrives to the man Paul to give the material evidence. The man calls John for coffee in the house and asks about the case. John says that the newspapers basically wrote everything. The killer was arrested for beatings, but the officer has a feeling that he missed something. Paul suggests adding cognac to the coffee. Paul says that he was married, but the wife couldn't stand it. The man asks how John's daughter is. John says she's going to college. Then John stands up and says it's time for him to leave. When John walks out the door, he thinks something, then he knocks again into the house. John tells Paul that the words of the man have caught him and asks him to stand tall. Paul straightens up, and John sees that he is very tall. The man abruptly slams the door. John calls for backup by radio. Then John breaks into the house. Inside, he sees many tools. Paul lashes out at John and strangles him, lifting him to the ceiling and wounding him in the stomach. The criminal hears the sound of a siren in the street and, wearing a suit, runs into the woods. John catches up with him and shoots him in the head, killing him. Jenna Marshall goes to college. Detective Julia and John accompany her, confident that the girl will be fine. This is the American film The Wolf of Snow Hollow. In the genres of horror, comedy, detective. Director is Jim Cummings.